Hello and welcome back to the studio. Well, as you saw from the thumbnail and the title of this video, it contains one of those sort of golden rules that I think every artist should observe. It's a trap that we can all fall into, and I very nearly did on this particular painting. So make sure you watch the video all the way to the end. We'll have a little chat about what it could be. And also, part of the video, we're doing a small field trip to a local park where the inspiration for this painting was photographed. Happy painting, people. So here's my canvas, and this is 16 by 20. I painted it with grey gesso, and for those of you who are interested, this is actually made of paper. I make my own paper DIY canvases for practice work, and I made a video all about doing your own paper canvases so you can save yourself a lot of money by doing these practice canvases, and then if you do something really great, you can repeat the painting on a proper canvas. But these are perfect for painting on. And let's have a quick look at my reference photograph here. It has the classic setup that I like, which is this is the main feature tree, and how far is that from the edge? You guessed it, about a third. So 2/3 up to that point, and sorry, a third this point and 2/3 that side. I'll get it right in a minute. And I love these reflections on the ground. So what I might tend to do is to actually move my tree up a little bit and play around with a little bit more foreground. There's this beautiful tree on this right side and some lovely light playing through here, and beautiful trees off in the distance behind the other side of a lake. So I might sort of simplify the background a little bit to make things easier for us as a painting. You don't have to paint everything you see in a photograph. That's something important to remember. Don't be a slave to this. It's inspiration only, as with all my paintings. So I'm only going to plan where that's going to be, but I'm not even going to make a mark on my canvas. But I want a lovely soft background, and here I'm going to be using a little bit of blue like Bob did in his originals. To get my painting started, I want to be using some of, if I can find it, I can't even find it, there it is. I want to be using some of this, which is Bob Ross Liquid White. This means we can paint a lovely soft background, and then we can paint wet on wet with our trees. I've got a small amount in an airtight pot, and I'm going to use that with an old Bob Ross 1-inch landscape brush to apply a thin even coat to my whole canvas. So here's that old Bob Ross landscape brush. I say it's well worn, but it's perfect for scrubbing on some liquid white. I'm going to take just a small amount, and it's probably easiest if you want to divide up your canvas into sections, do one section at a time, really scrub it in to the painting. Now, if you don't happen to have any Bob Ross liquid white, you can make a very similar sort of mixture by using maybe a little tiny drop of some titanium white, and then just adding a few drops of linseed oil to it. The idea is we want to make a thin, oily, wet background on which we can apply colour, which means that we can blend colour on the canvas. So there's the first corner done, and the way I test my canvas is to use my fingertips. I just touch the canvas and get a little sample, and what you're looking for is to see if you can see your fingerprints. Now you can see that my fingerprints are barely visible. That tells me that there isn't quite enough on my canvas. This is just a little bit too dry. I need to add a little bit more. If I don't put on some more, then the canvas will dry very, very quickly. It's probably within a matter of maybe an hour or two. So I want to actually apply enough to make sure my canvas stays wet and workable for about 5 or 6 hours. Now let's try that again. There. Now you can see clear fingerprints. Everywhere has got a nice thin even coat. That's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm going to carry on doing that on all the other parts of my painting. So there we are. I finished my entire canvas. I did it section by section, and I always finish off with some long flat strokes, and then I test my canvas one more time, because if we don't get this right, then our painting will be in trouble from start to finish. As you see, a nice even coating everywhere. In Bob's original painting, I'll bring up there in the corner, he has a very, very soft pastel blue sky made of phthalo blue. If you look at my reference photograph, you can see, well, the sky is almost white. The sunlight was coming from directly facing the camera, and it's the reason why you see these lovely bright fringes and edges but of course the sky was bleached out. But I don't have to put up with that. I can have a little bit of a blue sky. So let's do that first. And I'm going to be using this brush. Again, it's got some liquid white on it, so I'm going to give that a quick dry clean. And I'm going to take the smallest amount of phthalo blue. Now here's my palette, and I'll list the colours down below in the description, but I want a very soft pastel blue sky. So just a tiny touch on my brush, just work it into the bristles. Through my tree there are lots of little bits of sky showing through, and I want little touches of that. And there's a patch of nice blue over in here. And I'm not going to go too pale with this. I want to be a little bit of colour in here, because it's possible this background sky could look, well, almost washed out. In the photograph it's pretty bleached out. But again, it's our world. We paint what we like. And I'm going to pick up a little bit more blue. There's a bit of dark shade here on the corner, but that's okay. I might change things up a little bit, so I'm just putting on some blue in here and there. Put a few little bits of blue in here, maybe a few little holes through my painting. Remember, we have that tree trunk on the third line there, and that tree extends over nearly all of this sort of left-hand side of my canvas. Now, it's quite interesting actually when I'm painting and talking about what I'm doing, because in previous videos I've just added the narration after the event. But it doesn't mean to say that when I was doing videos the other way that I wasn't talking to myself. Now, I know, it was the sort of standard joke, isn't it, that if you're slightly mad you talk to yourself, but that it's not always such a bad thing. It's okay to be talking to yourself. And I think it's true. I think it's nice to encourage yourself when you're painting to be kind of talking yourself through the painting and kind of confirming what you're doing. There we go, I finished this off with some nice flat strokes. So, Bob was asked a question one day. He was asked how many times does he practice a painting before he actually paints it. And he would say, I practice it hundreds of times. And they said, really? So you painted it hundreds of times? He says, no. He said, in my head, I practice it. I talk about it. I'm convinced I'm doing it. I'm sat in front of my canvas and I'm talking my way through it. I'm almost sort of doing like a slow motion replay of the whole painting before I even paint something on a canvas. And that's much the same the way I paint. And you often see people, sportsmen, do it when they're talking about doing a particularly difficult manoeuvre, and they kind of run through it in their heads. You almost see them kind of thinking about a course or a track or something they're going to be running, and they sort of talk their way into it, and they kind of almost can see it in their mind's eye. And painting is no different. I know I've put blue down there won't be a river down there, but you never know. A little bit of that blue might come through. I might decide I'm going to put a puddle in there or something, and I've got my blue ready. So, as I say, talking to yourself while you're painting, nothing wrong with it. Get a few strange looks, mine, but oh, there we go. So whilst I've been yakking, I've just done this very soft pastel blue sky, and I'm going to go for lovely oranges and yellows. And if you look at your colour wheel, you'll see opposite the blue tones, the oranges and yellows. So the two colours will be complementary. And Bob was very clever, because when he did his painting, The Magic of Fall, he used a blue sky and bright yellow trees. So I'm going to do what Bob did. Let's work on our background detail next. One of the colours I'm going to be needing for my painting is a brown tone. You'll see it over on the left hand side of my reference photograph. That's this sort of warm chocolatey brown colour, and you see a little bit more of that. It's actually probably dark green colour, but it looks sort of chocolatey brown here, and you can see that same sort of chocolatey brown shadow in there. I don't want to use black, that's too sort of dull and dead, so I'm going to mix up a Christmas brown colour, and that is made with alizarin crimson and some sap green. I'm going to just take, well, let's take all of that and put a little bit of sap green with it. About 2 to 1. Mix that up. Nice warm brown tone. And you can make it slightly more to the red side, more to the green side. I'm probably going to go probably slightly more to the red side for this particular paint. So it's sort of more of a warm reddish brown tone. There's like a pathway. And what I'm going to do is just going to take the point of my knife and I'm just going to simply make myself a little mark here. Maybe it's going to be a road coming forwards and a road coming forwards that way. Now, have a check on that. That's going to be the exit point. Okay, the pathway goes over to there. Look how much wider that is here. Really much, much wider. And you do need that sense of scale. You can go from much wider to much smaller quite quickly in a painting. That's in probably a third of my painting. And I'm going to have my big tree somewhere over in here. I'm just going to scratch a mark. Again, it's about a third maybe. Might be a bit over a fraction more. So somewhere in here is going to be a big tree. Okay, and it's going to extend way out. It's going to go right out to the edge of my blue shape in here. So that's roughly where I think my tree is going to be, and it's going to extend right out over to about here. Which means I've got this sort of dead area in here where there's nothing much going on. In the reference photograph you can see there's some little trees and bushes, but they're way back in the distance, and I want to bring something a little further forward. And Bob put in some soft foliage in here, what I call sort of filler foliage. I'll use a nice soft newish 1-inch brush here. I run out of sap green, I have to put some more out. But I'm going to take maybe just a little yellow ochre, just a little touch of my Christmas brown colour here. Just want a sort of soft ochre colour. See, and the colours I'm going to mix up here, sort of maybe an autumn leaf colour, so very soft. And I want to tap to open my brush. Can you see that lovely pattern it makes? Well, imagine put a nice little bush back in here. Maybe I'll get my brush and I'll just, see, just kind of create these lovely soft patterns and shapes. Now, so this is going away for us in the painting, so and I know where that big tree is going to be, so I'm going to just tap this in. Let some of that little bit of that light come peeking through. Reload. We get a little bit more of that brown colour. As I say, in the reference photograph it looks like there are bushes way back. My bushes look like they're a bit closer. I just kind of get a little bit more brown on my brush. Maybe I want something just in here which looks closer still. And these raggedy edges are going to be very useful for when I put my tree on there. I don't want a hard line to try and fit to. I'm going to overlap. The big tree is going to overlap this one. Alizarin crimson and sap green colour that I'm using. Maybe down here, right in the corner. I want this to be very dark. Try not to make these look too symmetrical, because they can look like stripes if we're not careful. Okay, so put out a little touch more of the sap green colour. I think I'm quite liking what I've done here. I don't really want to add too much more to this. So I think I'm quite good to go into some sap green, a little Christmas brown. And instead of just loading my brush, tapping it in, I'm going to just drive it in like that. I'm going to load just the edge of my brush with some paint. Just push it ahead. See what I'm doing? I'm kind of making a line of paint. I'm going to be forcing a corner. I'm forcing paint onto this corner because I want to kind of create some nice sort of trees and bushy shapes in here. So instead of just tapping straight, I might be just bringing in maybe some more detail sort of hanging out over the edge here. See, I'm just going to tip my brush slightly over, create some nice patterns. Maybe this is a little bush or a tree. It's coming in from the side. And by doing this, you see, I kind of block off one side. So visually my eyes are being kind of drawn through to the center. I'm sort of taking this, it's what I call an exit point. If I just close that gap there, see my eye can't go that way anymore. It hits this and it has to follow the line of the path. These are just little tricks that we use when we're painting to direct our eyes in a certain direction. And the weight of the branch hangs down. So we've got a nice kind of pattern there with our fingers hanging in from the side. And I might darken that up a little more. I think I might also put a tree trunk through there, just to kind of pin it all together. So my paintings are that sort of slightly empty looking stage where there are lots of nothing happening, lots of sky nothing happening, and nothing happening in here. And you could sort of lose heart with the painting at this stage, because whilst the bones of it look okay, it just lacks a little something, doesn't it? And as I say, sometimes when I used to paint, I would get disheartened at this stage, and I would think, oh, no, it's not going in the right direction. I don't know what's wrong with my painting. And I start trying to judge it too soon. And this is a key factor when you're painting. And this is something I want you to really keep in mind when you're painting, is don't prejudge your work too soon. I think more people prejudge and stop a painting too soon. And this just happens. It's just one of those things. Now I'm going to be putting on a little bit of there's a pathway in my reference photograph. You can't see it very well because the sunlight's so strong on it, but I'm thinking light coming through here. And this is going to be casting a shadow here. So I've just got a little bit of that brownish kind of colour there. And I want this to kind of be going off in the distance. And literally just, again, I'm thinking about the path being fairly level. It's tempting sometimes, again, when you're doing a pathway to do it like that. And I was trying to think about, if I were walking along, I'd want it to be in such a way that I could actually get along the pathway. And it has to be fairly level and fairly flat. So at this stage, again, I'm just sketching this in. Firm up that edge a little bit more because it was getting a bit lost. There we go. Put a little bit more yellow ochre into that, just for fun. So I've given that brush a nice dry clean. So it's had green on it, and that was used to make the Christmas brown colour. And I'm going to go straight into some nice, rich, warm alizarin crimson colour here. And this is very much for the underpainting for my main tree. So, and again, I'm just going to see what that colour looks like. Do I like it? Is it too muddy? It's surprising, isn't it? We can sometimes put a little colour on here and see what it looks like. I'm not sure. I think that looks a little bit sort of too muddy. I might have to change my brush. Maybe I should take a little Indian yellow with my crimson. This produces a lovely burnt orange colour. Here goes a nice, really warm burnt orange. We can add a little touch of white into that too. I think that maybe would give us a more realistic colour than this. This looks a little bit sort of pinkish. Let's make that look more kind of like burnt orange colour. Yeah, I think that little change there kind of looks about right. You know, and if I do this and I don't like it, well, I can always get rid of it. What do you reckon? I'm going to leave a few holes in here. Don't overfill it. And again, you see I'm using that corner of the brush technique here. I'm just literally stabbing in some colour here. I'm thinking about the branches. I know how big the tree's going to get. So I'm going to get it right out to there. You can see my little line I scratched on. So maybe just not much paint on my brush. I should just fill the tree out a little more. And what I'm doing is I'm just literally looking at my reference picture. I'm looking here to here and back again. And to see if I can make something of sense. It's a bit red, but that's okay. Again, I leave these little things in. You don't have to fix everything. You just don't have to fix everything you do. I think we worry sometimes that we do little things and it kind of like ruined a painting in seconds. And do you know what? I can't think of many paintings that I've ruined with just one brush stroke. I can think of many that I've ruined with 50 or 60 brush strokes, but very few that I've actually just ruined with one brush stroke. So, you know, it's if you throw a little colour on there, it's a little abstract, it's okay. Okay, so I put some black with my Van Dyke brown. I dry cleaned my filbert brush, so I really just want a really good strong dark colour here. Again, I look at my reference picture, and as you can see, really nice and strong. It's probably finishing a little. There's the little pathway going off, and it goes kind of around to the right. So I kind of moved my tree up a little bit, and maybe it just sort of kind of comes in there. Just kind of mark out where I think the centre line is going to be for my tree, and I think I might remember that its foot's down in here. Okay, so don't go spreading it out too soon, but then I might just sort of imagine where the tree trunk's going to go. Get my reference photograph here. Maybe I got something through into here. And this is what I call a stop-start tree trunk. You see, I'm instead of doing a whole trunk like Bob would do sometimes, I like to play. I like to do these start-stop trunks. We you see just a little bit of the tree trunk here and there through the painting. A bit more shadow in here on the pathway. And it kind of comes out, the light comes through there, catches it there. I think that's looking quite good, isn't it? So as you saw in that last little section, how easy it could have been for me to have quit on this painting. I pointed out as I was painting that sometimes, well, a painting goes through a phase where you just sort of almost give up on it. You lose sort of hope. You can't sort of see where the painting's going. And this is the point where you've really got to sort of steel yourself a little bit and say, no, I must carry on painting. I think if I have a number one reason why most people don't get on with art and don't get on with their paintings, they just quit too soon. We want to critique our work before we got too far. Now, this isn't the first time I've mentioned this, but I think it's probably my number one reason why paintings tend to never get finished. I gripped my teeth and I carried on. I stuck to my guns, I stuck to my plan. And you can see that last little section there, I spent maybe 20 minutes just blocking in the tree, putting in the pathway. Suddenly my painting starts to develop, doesn't it? We start getting enthusiastic again. So my top tip, don't prejudge your work too soon. I think I've got the bones of lovely painting here, so let's push on. time to detail our painting. Now we've sort of massed in where we think the biggest chunks need to be. And for that, I'm going to downscale my brushes. I'm going to be using one of my frayed up old fan brushes, really lovely. A fan brush that's now turned into one of my dagger detail brushes. And if you haven't seen how to make your own, I did a video all about this. I'll drop a link in the description. And a filbert brush, which I'll probably be using more for sort of down in this area on the pathway. So I could use a 1-inch brush for the detailing, but I think it's sort of slightly more controlled if you want to use something like this. So remember that the light is coming from behind this tree and streaming through this way. It's my little light patch here between these bushes. So let's think about starting to add some highlight into this area and some detail. So here's my palette that I've been using. And for my highlighted colours, I'm going to take a little swatch of that. Some white, maybe a little touch of some Indian yellow colour. I want sunshine, and that looks just like real sunshine to me. Now, titanium white is a little on the heavy side, and it may not stick so well to my painting. So let's see how this goes. And I've sort of started with this brush, and I'll see how that goes as well. I could change my fan brush, but I'm sort of trying to imagine just a fringe of highlight on some of these trees here. Is this getting me the look I'm wanting? I'm not sure I like that brush for this job. So before I do too much more, maybe I'll try a fan brush. I load a good amount of paint on the edge of my brush. See how that gives a different look. This gives a slightly more blobby look, whereas the fan brush does a sort of a softer look. I think I might go with that one. There, you see my tree starting to brighten up. I'll do a little bit more time lapse through here, maybe add a few more branches in with my liner brush. Well, that's my main tree highlighted, and it's very tempting to want to come back in and put more and more highlights on. Excuse me. But in actual fact, I may almost have taken it too far, and I might even want to come back and punch in some more orangey red colours. If you look at the original one, I've really brightened my tree up quite a bit. I'll see how I feel. Excuse me. But I would want to put some highlights on some of these bushes, which is this tree and this tree. And you see I had a little mishap there, and well, these things happen. I have my palette off to one side. I might make that into a little feature. I've given my fan brush a bit of a dry clean. I've got sap green, cadmium yellow. Remember that I want to catch the top edges of this and get a really lovely bright sparkle. And again, this paint's a little on the dry side. It feels dry. It looks dry on my palette. It looks extremely bright actually, so let's see what happens. Will it stick? Because the golden rule is that a thin paint will stick to a thick paint, and this is very dry and tacky almost, so we'll have to wait and see. If it doesn't stick, we just have to add a little drop of linseed oil or thinners. So I've got a little drop of linseed oil here. I'm getting with that brush, Paulie, come on. Okay, and just take out a little bit with the handle of my liner brush, just grab a little bit, a few drops. And I drop it on my palette. I've added one small drop right there on my palette. Can you see that one drop? You wait and see what happens. Look at that. It transforms my paint from sticky and dry. One tiny drop of linseed oil. It's now sort of soft and buttery. Wow, look at that. It sticks instantly. So when I say just add a tiny drop of something to your palette, I really mean just one little drop. That's all you need. Now the light's coming through over the top of this clump of bushes, so I need to just make sure I get that edge nice and bright. And I just have to add a few sparklers here. If you enjoy my tutorials, don't forget to like and subscribe. That's it. Hit the little thumbs up button. Doesn't cost a penny, but it means YouTube gets to know that you are enjoying what I'm doing. Plus, ring the little bell icon. That means every time I release some new videos, you'll be the first person to know about it. If you want to go a step further, you can always buy me a coffee. Link in the description below. Thank you. Okay, I've made a bit of a blend of colours here. I took some sap green, some Indian yellow, a touch of white, and I made myself a bit of a spectrum of greens. Darkest on the left, lightest on the right. And again, another drop of linseed oil into it, just to sort of soften the whole thing up. And I want a slightly different tone of green. This is quite sharp and bright. I want it's maybe a little bit more muted. And again, I just want to think about catching maybe just a few branches here. It doesn't have to be highlighted all the way across. Now, do a little touch. This is a slight variation of colour. I quite like that. Have the chance when you come in with your detailing brush, your fan brush, whatever you want to use, and you can just get a little bit more kind of delicate on those ends, especially if you find a corner of the brush painting a little bit of a challenge. Here you can say just mass, put in the mass of colour, and just kind of come back and just finesse it a little bit. Again, I'll do a little bit of time lapse for this. But now I want to turn my attention to this pathway. It's really one of the main elements of our painting. And I've mixed up a little bit of lavender. I've got mainly crimson and some phthalo blue. And I've added the tiniest drop of black into it as well, just to give myself a really deep lavender colour. Now, when I talk about adding shadows into my paintings, most people would just grab a tube of black paint. And I'm going to encourage you to start trying some rather more abstract sort of colours, like using dark purples. They add a different depth of colour to your painting. So if I just take a little bit of this lavender colour in here. Now my green is still a little tacky, so this lavender will mix in quite well. But can you see how that it still produces a lovely dark shadow colour? Let's drag a little bit more across the canvas. Let's put some on this side here. And let's think about adding a nice shadow under here. Okay, this is a better example. Now this is lavender. Dark lavender colour. And yet, when it mixes with that light brown tone here, it gives me a very convincing shadow colour. I want to do away with these lower branches. Just let that kind of work its way down into the corner. I want a very dark corner, really almost completely black. And I'm going to encourage you to start experimenting using different shadow colours for your own paintings. Don't always reach for black or brown, but think about using something like a lavender tone. You might well find that you can really get your paintings to come along nicely. Trying to just reinforce that edge a little bit here. I put a bit too much shadow in here, but it's okay. I can take some of this away. Don't be afraid to use lavender as a shadow colour. Darker with a touch of black, but I would say that nearly all of my shadow colour here is lavender. And I think that gives my painting a sense of warmth that I really appreciate, I really like. I wanted to also think about maybe some light coming across the pathway, some shadows from the tree. So maybe I'll just wipe off my brush a little bit. Imagine this tree's going to cast a really big shadow, wouldn't it? So I'm just going to put that across. I'm going to go right across my pathway. And remember, detail at the base of the tree is going to be very, very close. In other words, the tree and its shadow are going to be very, in terms of accuracy, they're going to be really quite detailed. So if there's a bump on the tree, it will show on the shadow. But as you go further up the tree, this shadow becomes more abstract and loose. And remember, the tree is upright and face on. This is a shadow that's laying flat. So the shadow can be much more loose and abstract. It does not have to be at all accurate. So you can really have some fun with the shadows cast by a tree. You do not have to be at all constrained by making it look like anything in particular. You see, I can just drag that across there. Now look at that. I didn't do anything there. I put in a clue as to there might be a tree trunk here. And I just let my brush wander about. I left a few little bits of light here and there that I put in earlier. Remember, I left some pale blue colour from the sky. I left them there. People thought it was a river. I tricked you. But look how little I just did with my brush. And yet, I think I have a believable shadow of a tree on the ground. I leave a little bit of light through here. I'm going to make this into more of a feature. Sometimes we paint what I call too furiously. We force our paintings to try to make them look a certain way. And then you watch somebody like me come along, and I know it's going to be frustration for you, for people looking at me paint and just think to themselves, well, what did he do that I don't do? How comes he just did all that and this looks like that shadow of a tree and this suddenly all fell in place? What did I do that you don't do? I paint intuitively and I don't sit and labour thinking about one, and I do as little painting as possible. Honestly, I paint as little as possible for the best effect. And I think if you can learn to do the same, if you can learn to do little bits of painting that have the most impact for your paintings, I think if you can learn to do that, I think that would be for me a great thing to do. I can't say any more than that really, but I think sometimes we just try too hard to do too much with what we've got, and I think quite often I like to leave my paintings a little almost ragged and unfinished. Okay, let's chat more painting. For this next section of my painting, I'm going to use a small flat brush. Now, I'm sure Bob would have used something like this had he had it in his kit of brushes. And I want to just add some of the brighter lights onto my pathway. I I want to have some of this light shining through. So looking at my palette, you see I've got some nice yellow ochres and whites. And I'm just going to take something fairly bright. And when you think about adding light onto the ground, you don't want lots of it, but you do want a few little pinpoints. So I'm looking at this little hole here, and I'm seeing this area here, and I want to make this a bit of a focal point. And I can only suggest when you do this sort of thing to try and do it with just as few brush strokes as possible, and say just drop in a few strokes. It's all it takes. If you fiddle with it too much, it just ends up losing something. And I know that if you look at that tree and you're trying to work out how that light could hit the ground, the answer is I don't know. It's just artistic license, maybe. You just play around and do whatever you want. If it looks right, leave it in. If it looks wrong, change it. And of course, every once in a while, take a step back from your painting, see how it's looking, see how it's going. Is it forming up the way you want it to? Now I've just put some bright lime green colour on my liner brush. I think there may be a few little strands of grass here just catching the light as it comes past that hedge. These may not show up because I'm painting against a light background, so sometimes what we do doesn't quite work out, but we'll try our best. I think we could do with a little bit of leaf litter coming across the pathway there, so I think we're going to definitely put some of that on there. And my weapon of choice is always going to be a palette knife, or maybe even a small flat brush, but I just like to put on just a few little leaves. I think the palette knife just does a really nice job, just dropping in those little dots of colour. It just takes a little while to do, so again, I'll do a little time lapse through this section. Okay, final touches. I think I want to drop in some of the oranges and yellow colours into this little bit of foliage over here. It's looking very green, not very autumnal, so I'm going to just touch. I'm literally taking just a small amount of orange on my brush, and just here and there, the first suggestions that this little bit of foliage here is about to go into its autumn colour. So I'm just putting on just a few little hints here. There doesn't have to be much, just the odd little touch. And I fiddled about here. I quite like my little patches of light. I like my little fallen leaves here. I like the way that sort of kind of disappears off into the distance. No detail back here. And these little grasses here just sort of holding in the edge of my path. I could sit and play with my painting for hours, but that you wouldn't get to see it on the video. So I think time to put this painting to bed. So there we have it. A lovely painting with a golden rule that everybody should observe. Now don't move, because I did a lovely painting last week where I put a deer into a forest scene. Want to know how that was done? Well, here's the link to that video. Happy painting, people.